Alright guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to start shading your portrait. So I'm going to show you two different methods. I've got my blending stump or a cotton swab and pencil. My eraser is also going to be a very important tool. So these are kind of some of the things that you want for this particular section, okay? So I always like to start with the darkest point, and usually the darkest point is going to be either your eyes, your eyebrows, or some dark shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my eye. So I obviously have got some makeup on there. So I'm going to add that definition to my eye. And then, like the tutorial that we did when we were doing our facial features, you know that the darkest point of your eye is that top section. I've got a highlight on my eye right about here. So I'll make sure that I leave that clear, but you still have to be able to see my pupil down there. Okay. So the first method that I'm going to show you is the blending stump. If you have one, awesome. If you don't, no big deal. There's other tools like the cotton swab or your eraser that you can use. So the blending stump is great because it's basically kind of like a pencil. It smoothens things out, but it also picks it up along the way. As you can see, I have a very dark side and I have a cleaner side. So I'm going to start with the very dark side. And once again, very intentional with my motions. I'm following the path that I want it to fade into. And I'm fading it more towards my eyelid. Okay, now I'm going to go into my eye. Sometimes going in circles creates a very smooth transition. And you can see there's places where I didn't necessarily add graphite, but because my blending stump has picked it up, it's kind of doing the job for me. Okay. So, you can use either your eraser or the one on your pencil, but my highlight obviously got a little bit covered, so I'm going to make sure I erase that highlight on there. I think there's a little bit of a highlight over here and a little bit less shading over here, okay? So like last time I told you, I like to add some details, make sure those corners are crisp. It's a lot of going back and forth, back and forth. Okay. And your eyelashes, can't forget about your eyelashes. They overlap your eye and curve out. Okay. So now we're going to move in to the eyebrow upper area. So there tends to always be a little bit of a shadow here. So notice how lightly I'm adding graphite, very lightly. Almost your entire face will have some sort of highlight or shadow. Now I'm going to show you the cotton swab method. So it's just like the blending stump. Going to be very intentional with your motions. If you go in circles, it creates a nice fade out. So as you see, the cotton swab works just as much as the blending stump. Okay, Your eraser is also your best tool too. If you apply a lot of pressure, it gives you that crisp white. If you don't apply a lot of pressure, then it also it lets you blend stuff out as well. Okay, so we have that shadow there. I'll create a little highlight here between the eye. Okay, now the eyebrows. A lot of people always ask me, how do you do eyebrows? So eyebrows follow different directions. So usually up here, especially my females out there who draw their eyebrows on, you'll know that you start going upwards and then it kind of starts slowly transitioning into horizontal. So I don't spend too much time detailing the eyebrows because I'm actually going to blend them all together to create that darker area first. And then I keep going over it in pencil to kind of detail the direction of the actual individual hairs themselves. Okay. Okay. So for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. That way you guys can understand how to keep shading. So then your eye has a little bit of a shadow here too. And then usually where your eye kind of starts to meet the edge of your face, there's a dark shadow as well. And these shadows are literally, if you study, remember we did those skull studies? These shadows are created by your skull sockets and like all the holes inside your skull. We're going to keep going with the cheek. I like to just kind of start adding where I see all my shadows, because when I start getting into the more general areas, it all will kind of blend together. And then there's a slight little shadow this way. So if you notice, it's like wherever the bumps or those curves follow, you're kind of following that shape itself. And then here we're going to be following kind of the bridge of the nose too. So remember we said the bridge of the nose is a lot of shading. It's basically where it's coming from. So like I said, you can use your cotton swab or your blending stump. I'm going to be using the blending stump for the sake of time. It's a little bit quicker. And go in with my darker spot. I'm following the direction I want, but notice how I'm going in circles. It's because I want it, the circles help you kind of fade out into that white in a smooth transition. So I'm creating like this dark point, mid-tone, light tone. If you remember that sphere that we went over one time with our value practice, this is exactly what's happening here. Okay. The cotton swab also helps to kind of smooth things out if I don't like something, I go back with my eraser very lightly. And just kind of fade it out, okay? So, one thing that I forgot to tell you guys is that you have to erase your grid before you start drawing. Because as you can see, here's a problem. You can see the grid behind my shading, and if I go back and erase that grid and try to blend this out, I just made my life 10 times harder because it's not going to be even. You're always going to start seeing that like off color on there. So you want to make sure that once you're drawn your outline that you erase the grid before you start shading, or else this will happen to you. Okay, so before we keep going, we're going to erase the grid. That way it doesn't keep getting in the way. Okay. And if you're nervous about erasing the grid, you can erase it as you're going along. That way you guys can keep track of what you're shading and stuff like that. But I'm going to do part of the hair. That way you guys see the example, and then I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. So I'm going to do this part of the hair because it's the easiest. So I see there's a lot of dark here. And then it gets lighter when it comes closer to the edge, right? So what I like to do is literally blend everything out together first to get the variety of tones I want. Okay, so now that we've got that, I start drawing the darker hairs. And now I'm just going to try and fade those individual hairs, and here's where your eraser is your best friend. Either your pencil eraser or this one. This one, if it's larger chunks, you're going to start erasing the highlights of your hairs. This one, if it's slimmer chunks. And then sometimes I go back with my pencil and get some darker points in between. Always looking at what I see, obviously. And the hair is where you really need some patience. Blend those out. And basically hair is just highlights and shadows of the hairs that are highlighted, the hairs that are darker. And that's basically how you do hair. Okay, so these are different shading techniques. I'm gonna let you go ahead and keep working on this. You will have the rest of class to work on your shading.